Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant, and I'm so excited that you have been with us and our two co-hosts, Royce Russell Esquire, Edward Pichardo Esquire, as we have been bringing you all the content and information for one full season. Can you believe? Let's just celebrate for a moment. First
What?
season of Speaking Legally. We
What?
wrap up next week, Wednesday. First season in the can. So we thank you
Yo.
all for being a part of our show, for engaging, being here, supporting, sharing the broadcast, giving us your comments. So we appreciate each and every one of you. And we know it's holiday season. So we want you to be safe. It's a different holiday season. So we want everyone to be careful. This COVID-19 apparently is mutating and causing more challenges than we had before. So just be careful. Wear your masks, use your sanitizers, social distance as best you can. Don't get too comfortable because we want to be able to enjoy season 2 with everyone. So welcome to the show and welcome, Richard. Thank you for being one of our greatest supporters and listeners here on the platform. I'm going to turn it over to my co-hosts so they can greet you today. We'll start with Edward Pichardo Esquire. ¿Cómo está?
Oh, muy bien, muy
Arigato.
bien.
Arigato.
Muy bien, muy bien. Buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Here at Speaking Legally. Thank you for coming on. As usual, I believe you're going to find the content fulfilling and educational as well. So welcome. Hola.
I just want to say thank you for all that that's tuned in, and I want to thank Stacy for making that. Let me see. This is MMIA. So that is most important announcement of the day, which is that we're entering our second season, right? That's the most important announcement of the day. Nothing else can be greater than that, right?
That's right. That's right.
We give information from mind to mouth, and we've been always ahead of the block, around the corner, ahead of the curve. So we're going to continue to do that as we provide information to our people and try to provide it with a cultural spin so it is relatable and we know how to deal with the challenges and we know what the law is. So I want to say thank you for everybody that's listening, and let's get cracking.
And if I may, thank you, Dr. Grant, for ensuring the consistency of this show. For some of our viewers, for some of our viewers that may not understand, we actually prepare for this show. We think about the content and we put some thought into it and try to offer you timely.
Yeah, we actually put thought into our content.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed. And we work on it. We're not just flying by the seat of our pants.
No.
We do research here, and the idea here is the consistency. Every week, every Wednesday, because sometimes what ends up happening is, and I'm guilty. I know I've missed a few shows, but for any time that you're able to put forth a sustained activity with regularity, that speaks to something special. So I say thank you to Dr. Grant, and I say thank you to my colleague Royce Russell on this. And it's beautiful to know that we're completing this first season.
And
Absolutely.
Anything that you do for 30 days is a habit. So we beyond the 30 days. This is a habit for us, right? And it's a habit for our listeners.
A good habit, by the way.
A good habit, right? That good habit.
Oh my goodness. Right. Yes, we only want good habits, but thank you for that, Ed. It really has been just wonderful to add Speaking Legally to my TV network, because that's clearly what launched in the middle of COVID. And the shows that we provide that bring value and add content, and yes, consistency is king. Consistency beats talent any day, right? So if you can be consistent and stay the course, we've wanted and started this show with an intention of being able to share from those of you who are on the ground. The two of you do this work every day, all day. And we appreciate the insight that you've been able to provide, as well as highlighting some of the news stories that don't make it to traditional media. So we're very, very grateful and thank you for that. And thank you, Richard. We appreciate you and thank you for always being here. Hey, Jason, thank you for tuning in. And all of you who watch the replays or you've shared this out, we appreciate it. Next week literally closes out season 1. So you can catch the replays on Destiny Designers TV on YouTube, or you can go to Mr. Russell's Facebook page or Edward Pichardo's Facebook page, and you can see all of our episodes there as well, as we look forward to how we will increase and scale our show for 2021. God Spare Our Lives. I'm excited about having this platform and using it wisely so that we can help our community where the legal meets the cultural. So with that said, hey Dennis, thank you so much. Thank you for watching again. We appreciate you. So we know a lot is going on in the news, and we try to focus on things that are relative to what's happening in our community specifically, and helping you to be empowered with the knowledge of what it is that you need to be aware of as you help talk to friends, advise people. We have some we call them the sidewalk lawyers, but we have the real attorneys here that can address and answer questions and or concerns about things that you see. So search warrants is something that's not new to our community, not new to our neighborhood. And I just want our attorneys to give some background around search warrants before we share another unfortunate situation in the news. So, Mr. Russell, I know you had some thoughts about this that you want to share with our listeners today.
Definitely. And as a former prosecutor in Bronx County and as a prosecutor on the federal level, Department of Justice, and giving all the kudos to my partner, Mr. Pichardo, who is soon as coming out of the law school gate, went straight into legal defense work for that poor price that a legal defense fund can give him. But, you know, he did what he had to do, right? And so we are very familiar with the word called warrants. Let's just start there, right? And we ain't talking about my man Warren from the other island. We're talking about warrants, right? And so, you know, as we go through this show, I just wanted to give a little bit more information and education about what is a warrant, right? What is the distinction between a search warrant and an arrest warrant? Because I think the footage that we're going to show here puts it all together. You know, it'll make more. It just puts all of the violations that you can possibly think of, the indignities, the abuse of authority, the abuse of power. After learning this material, you can see how it all materialized. So when we talk about warrants, there are two types. There are arrest warrant and there are search warrants, right? And I'll just start there. There are other offshoots from that. An arrest warrant is a warrant that could be issued by the court, but usually is issued from the precinct, from the police department. They're looking for someone. And they give them power to, one, go to your residence or go where the person may be if it's at work, and seek to arrest that person. We're going to put that to the side. Of your cousin Ed is hiding in your apartment and you know that he's wanted for a crime, or Shaniqua, she's wanted for an assault, and the police have an arrest warrant. They're going to come to your apartment. They're going to knock on that door. They're going to say, we're looking for this person. And if all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, they're going to come in and they're going to look for that person. But then there's what we call a search warrant, which deals with property, which deals with illegal contraband, which deals with things that we know as drugs or guns or something of that sort. And police can get a search warrant for that. Usually how that is derived is by way of a confidential informant. And what do we mean by a confidential informant? That is someone that identity is sealed, is not open to the public. It is something that the police and the district attorney's office hold close to their heart to never reveal until the last possible moment. So that is the confident part. The informant part, confident in offshoot of confidential, informant part is that person usually gives information. And that person gives information either based upon what they have personally witnessed and participated, and what I would say half of the time, what they heard someone say or gossip in the projects. Either way, with that information, usually officers, if they're going by way of a confidential informant, will present that information to a judge, for which a judge will sign or will consider to sign a search warrant. And one of the two things that the officers have to present to the judge is that this confidential informant is, one, reliable. That means they've used them in the past. And two, is truthful, veracity. And so based upon that and the information, which might be particular in that the person, the confidential, the CI, might have bought illegal products, drugs or what have you from apartment 6C, and therefore they have a particular place. He bought it at a particular time, and he knows that drugs is sold from that particular address and has given information before, or the police had him actually go in and purchase those drugs. And we use terms like pre-recorded buy money. That's money that is marked. If we're talking about a drug scenario, where they will purchase and they will come back out with the drugs and the money the soon-to-be potential defendant will hold. And so with that information, the police can then approach a judge and have the judge hopefully execute a search warrant. Now, on the federal level, usually the FBI, they do their own investigation. So they control, the ins and the outs. They dot the I's, they cross the T's. So when they go before a judge, they're swearing to what they have done, their investigation, what transactions that they made. Either way, the judge then has a discretion upon hearing this information sworn. And a lot of you do not know that we always think about search warrants written. There can be an oral search warrant. It has to be a stenographer there. It has to be recorded. For just the written search warrant, the officer is sworn in. The document is read into the record. It's a private proceeding. No one is around. No juries. Only the assistant district attorney, the police officer, and the judge, for which the judge can then sign off on it. Upon signing off on the search warrant, then the police officer is up to him to go execute it. And so before you chime in, I just want to make sure our audience gets a couple more dot the I's and cross the T's. Usually when you have a search warrant, it has to be effectuated 10 days after it is signed, no more than 10 days. So you have a 10-day window. Usually the court that signs this search warrant has a geographical domain over the area that's being searched. So Bronx court judge signs a search warrant pertaining to a Bronx apartment. There's been some case law and some discussion about expanding that, whether a judge in the Bronx can sign off on a document for a resident in Manhattan. But the way the law works now is confined to a geographical and a jurisdictional type of setting. Now, also, the police officer can do what we call judge shopping. That means if they know a certain judge, let's just say Judge Pichado's on the bench today, and they have a search warrant, and that search warrant is a little shaky fugazi, if you know what I mean, right? The CI is not really all the way there, or the information is a little gray. What they'll do is they may not go to Judge Pichado. They may wait next week until Judge Grant is on the stand. And then they'll go to that judge because that judge might be more pro-prosecution, pro-police, and he or she will sign the search warrant. So there is no law against judge shopping, but I will tell you it does exist. It exists not only for the prosecutors, but it also exists for defense counsels when we're trying to have our bail reduced for our clients. We decide whether or not we want to go before a certain judge. Then there is a time issue. Usually search warrants cannot be effectuated before 6 a.m. and you have to conclude by 9 p.m. Now, can't come in before 6, can't come in after 9. That's most of the time. In that time period, there is no requirement that speaks to how long you can stay in between that time. So I can come in at 6 and stay all the way to 12, 1, 2, or 3. I would consider that abusive. However, there is no time limit that says when you have to leave as long as you finish by 9 p.m. That is the outer time limit. Let's just say the warrant is executed in that outer time limit. And so the hour particulars are really, really gray. So when you have a search warrant, the search warrant should also be particular. If you're looking for a gun and you know it's in a certain room, then you should confine yourself to that room and that area. So if I have a search warrant for apartment 6C and let's say the room is Ted's room, then search warrant should be particular to searching Ted's room. If it's a 2-story family house and Ted lives on the first floor, well, the search warrant only goes to the first floor. You can't go to the second floor where Fred lives or Ned lives. You can't do it. You got to confine yourself to the first floor. We know that that doesn't happen all the time, but that is some of the groundwork. So before we move on, Ed, I'll give you a chance to chime in because the video that we're about to see really hits on a lot of the subject matters of what should not be done in the abuse of power.
Now, I think one of the important things to mention, and I'm not sure if you clarified this a little earlier, there are two basically type of search warrants in many cases, and that's the knock and announce and the no knock.
No, you can cover that. Please.
Yeah, and so for the no knock, you have to be able to show the judge that's signing that warrant that there are circumstances in place that could lead to the destruction of evidence if the particular person whose apartment, room, or whatever or location is being searched discovers that a search is about to take place. And in many cases, or that it'll lead to some sort of, violence or somebody being injured. And that's what gives law enforcement the ability to basically force their way in without knocking. And what they talk about in many cases is the likelihood that, for instance, if the search is for narcotics, that the narcotics will be destroyed, that the evidence will be destroyed, that it will be flushed down the toilet, let's say, or set on fire or destroyed somehow. Then that's what gives that ability to get that type of search warrant. And one of the big things to look at, too, is verifying the information that's contained in that search warrant. Also, before the judge signs that search warrant, they're supposed to ask a number of questions to make sure that the police are actually, or law enforcement is actually entitled to this search warrant. And a lot of, issues come up in terms of, well, when did the CI give you this information? When did this particular buy that's the basis for the search warrant actually occurred? Have you done your due diligence in terms of making sure that before you execute that search warrant, that individual still lives at that residence?
And may I interject and just use one term, and you can use it freely, is what we call in a legal word stale, right?
Yes,
just like
indeed.
bread is stale.
Stale
Bread
information.
has mold on it. Bread is hard around the edges. We throw that out. So same thing here. Stale is the information recent, or is the information from 8 months ago? Like you said, does this guy still live there, or he moved 12 months ago? So staleness. You execute the warrant, you got to execute the warrant within a certain time period. If not, it's stale. So please continue.
Yeah, so in some of these cases, it's kind of like we're looking backwards in terms of, what happened here? Why did they go into this apartment and the person that they were looking for is no longer living there? And it makes you wonder, wait a minute, was there was false information placed into the warrant? Was the judge misled prior to signing it? Remember, Royce mentioned earlier, sworn. These law enforcement officers have to swear to the information that they're providing. And so forth. And so, a lot of these questions come up. And then, like I said, you got the knock, because there aren't these exigent circumstances. There really isn't, proof that there's going to be a destruction of evidence, let's say. And so, you got to knock, announce. Now law enforcement doesn't have to stand there for an infinite amount of time and wait for you to answer the door and or open the door. If they're knocking and you're not opening, they get they get to go in there regardless. And there's a body of case law there, and questioning these no knock versus knocks, because a lot of this stuff came into play in the 80s during the war on drugs, and this supposed need by law enforcement to surprise individuals, because if they don't, the evidence is going to be destroyed. And this has been the fruitful subject of a lot of legal commentary and critics and proponents on both ends. Early in my career as a public defender in the county of Racine, I was an assistant public defender with the Wisconsin Public Defender. I had a case of a young man who happened to be inside of either a house or an apartment. This was many years ago when a drug raid took place. Police went in. And because it occurred right at the cusp of a change in the case law, I was able to use the prevailing case law at the time to get the evidence discovered suppressed against him. There was several defendants in that case. I don't know what the other defense attorneys did, but certainly, at that time, at the Racine Public Defender's Office, we were doing, wonderful work there. And I just remember one of my more senior colleagues, the brother happened to be from New York. He had been with the Legal Aid Society in New York and had moved to Wisconsin. And I think it was about, a few weeks before I was preparing for my suppression hearing. And by the way, suppression means suppression of evidence, that you're trying to get the evidence against your client. You're trying to get the judge to say that can't be used against him or her. And so I had this young man. He had been in the house when some drugs were found, and they were charging him because he was there at the time that the drugs were found. And I was, and one of my colleagues came. He said, "Look, there's this new case. It just came down from the high court. Take a look at it, Ed. I think it's going to be a wonderful case for you," because we used to have like these weekly sessions where we would talk about our upcoming motions and in cases that we wanted our colleagues to be aware of, for discussion purposes. And he came to me. I think his name was Mark, and I didn't even have to argue the hearing. Once I communicated with my adversary on the other side, the assistant district attorney who was on the case, he said, "Ed, you got us. We'll go ahead and just voluntarily grant your motion." The judge was actually upset, but she had no choice. She said, "You know what? We have to grant you your motion, Mr. Pichardo. The law is the law, and the court has spoken." And so, as defense attorneys, and Royce will agree, when we have clients and they're charged and, there's a warrant involved, we'll examine that warrant very carefully. We'll take a look at it to make sure that, for instance, it doesn't, the drugs weren't found in room A, but the warrant was only for room B or for a certain part of the home. Whether the warrant was accurate in terms of, where it gave permission for law enforcement to enter. All of these, issues become a factor. Unfortunately, what you're going to see and what we're about to talk to shortly is what happens when things aren't done properly, and the disastrous results that can occur, and the effect on otherwise people, citizens who have nothing to do with anything in terms of drugs, crime, etc., not even having anybody living in their home who dabbles in such things.
One of the things I want to point out, I'm sorry, Dr. Grant, is that you mentioned a term, or you mentioned some points of information in reference to the search warrant and in reference to an arrest warrant. One should know that when you're dealing with a search warrant, since you're not dealing with, quote unquote, a dangerous situation, you're looking for drugs. You might be looking for a gun. You might be looking for stolen property. You might be looking for a computer. Something that in and of itself, unless a human being uses it, in particular a gun, in the wrong way, it will not hurt you. So my thought on that is that the level of escalation should be minimal, right? You want the element of surprise. And when we talk about no knock, everybody knows about Breonna Taylor and that entry, and how the officers you utilize a no knock, and they came in and you had gunplay, and to her demise, for which pending civil actions is now being pushed forward. So that's an example of a no knock, right? But when officers are approaching to execute a search warrant, the level of aggression should not be the same when they are executing an arrest warrant. An arrest warrant, you're executing that because you want to take a person. Usually the reason why there is an arrest warrant is because that person does not want to be taken into custody. So my brain says I can understand how you prepare for the worst and hopefully the best happens. That means you might have a mentality that is more aggressive than what you need in a search warrant. However, my experience has shown me that there is no distinction. The level of aggression, hostility, force appears to be the same. Now, that's based upon my experience as a civil rights attorney practicing in the area of forced arrest and police brutality, for which, if the officers go to the wrong apartment and search the wrong apartment, you better believe that you have a right to sue for violation of your civil rights. And so, when we analyze that, we need to understand that everything is not a four alarm fire. Some of this stuff you bring to the table, and that's the things that we speak to in reference to culturally. What are you bringing to the table when you're executing and you're using your authority in our community? Are you bringing total ill will? I mean, is there some middle ground, or is everything World War II and a four o'clock alarm fire?
I just want to mention one more thing, and I'm sorry, Dr. Gray, I just want to mention one thing too. There are situations here that fall short of basically a warrant a scheme. And what am I talking about? In many cases, either myself or Attorney Russell will get a call to say, hey, I just got a call from a detective after 50th precinct asking me to come down. They want to talk to me about something. And what we usually explain to clients is that, listen, I'll contact them and try to find out what's going on and walk you in. It may be a situation that there isn't a warrant out for you necessarily, but there is what they kind of call an I-card, some sort of investigation that's active involving you, and they want you to come down short of them having to seek a search warrant and come get you.
An arrest warrant.
An arrest warrant, or a situation where there's an active arrest warrant out there and you happen to be driving and this thing pops up and you with your family. That's kind of the scenario I discuss with my clients, because sometimes they're like, well, you mean I don't have to really go down there? Well, listen, man, the question is do you want to push them to have to get an arrest warrant, or do you want an arrest warrant to be on file? Because what happens is after the judge signs it, if they, then it becomes active in the system, so that if you get stopped and the police run your name, say, it will come up. And then at that point, you may be with your family. You don't know where you may be. And at that point, you have no control over the circumstances of your seizure or your removal from that vehicle or your arrest. So then it becomes an issue where, and I advise anybody who gets a call from a detective, come on down, to call an attorney, hire an attorney, retain an attorney to come down there, which you find out what's going on, arrange for a time and place that works for you, or rather not a time and place, but rather a time and date that, we can walk you down. And we're not talking about a month later or a week later. It's usually like, look, listen, man, I can try to get you a few days, but we gotta get down there before they go ahead
and everybody better realize that this, once you walk in, you might not walk out that same day. And that's the reality of making sure that you have a retained attorney. So we can't set it up. So we can do it on a Monday, and so this way you're back out on a Tuesday, not do it on a Friday, and I don't see you until Monday. You have the opportunity to coordinate and arrange for a surrender, which bodes well when you're in front of a judge. If it goes that far, they say, Judge, I spoke to the detective. The only delay here was that we were all trying to get our schedules together, and then here we are. But that's in the case of arrest warrant. Here we're talking about a search warrant.
And I wanted to just briefly, I'm sorry, and one other thing, in terms of the search warrant, sometimes police officers, not just in terms of a vehicle, in terms of a stop, can we search your trunk? You can say no. No, you can't search my trunk. You can't search my car.
That's right.
We'll get a warrant, then go get a warrant. Go get it signed, and I'll sit right here and I'll wait.
And when you do that, you have to understand, and we preach this all the time, for every action there's a reaction. So the action is no, You can't search my trunk, go get a warrant. The reaction is that you'll be sitting there for a while, but that's okay.
And in terms of my home,
That's
cop
right.
comes knocking. Oh, we heard that, you got something going on in there. You got this and you got that in there. Can we come in?
No,
You got a warrant?
no.
No. But we'll go get a warrant.
See you later.
Get a warrant. Until you show me a warrant, you can't come in here.
And that
Okay.
that infuriates a lot of law enforcement agents.
Right.
And I can see the glass half full, right? We're trying to protect the community. Why you being a stick in the mud? And the question becomes, if you had my eyes, all four of them, the two God gave me and the two that I have on my face to make sure I see correctly, you may not view it the same way. So, hence.
And if you're working somewhere where you're entrusted with certain confidential records and law enforcement comes and they're like, we need to see this, you need to think twice about whether or not you need to just hand that over to them. Because if they don't have a warrant and you hand over that stuff, you could really subject yourself and or that organization to a lawsuit. So just I just want to throw out those little tidbits there.
I mean, there's a lot to throw out, and no apologies. I know these points were important before we show what is a very graphic and heart-wrenching video, but I do want to put a little levity before we do that. Jerry said, how do you decide to move from New York to Racine, Wisconsin? So I just thank you for the little levity, Jerry. Appreciate you watching the show.
It's
and
called
then
a legal scholarship.
Look, the reason why you moved from New York to Racine is because maybe you got that warrant.
Run, Forrest, run, Forrest, run.
and then he also asks, is a knock and announce any better? And do you have to sit there and wait? So we could address that real quick before we show the video. And hey, DeAndre, great to see you on the show. Thank you for tuning in. And the proper paperwork talks, everything else walks. Yep, absolutely.
So as to the knock and announce, I mean, I'll share my experience representing a family where the police did not knock and announce, and the police entered the home because they didn't have a knock and announce warrant. They entered the home. It just so happened that the mother was at the grocery store. It was a search warrant, but there was a 13-year-old and a 3-year-old in the apartment. And since the police came in with guns drawn, the 13-year-old ran, and the police officer almost shot that kid because he just saw someone running. And that 13-year-old was running to his brother, who was 2 years old, to make sure that his brother didn't move anywhere. So, the element of surprise, I get it. I partially understand it, but it is always best practices for police to announce. And so people can live to see another day, because one fatal mistake is one fatal mistake too many.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, and we warn you if you're watching, just to prepare yourself for what you're about to see.
Another bad raid by Chicago police that the city's legal team is trying to stop us from telling you. It involves an innocent woman getting handcuffed, naked, with a dozen...
What she's saying really don't matter, is what we're viewing.
Are you hearing it?
We're hearing a little bit of it, but not fully.
Okay, so we'll turn it up because we do want folks to hear it. We'll just make sure we turn up the volume.
Naked with a dozen male officers watching. Now, she wants you to see the body camera video, but tonight the city went to federal court to try to keep it secret. Here's CBS 2 investigator Dave Sweeney.
It's still coming in faint.
Just gotten home from work. And while I was undressing in my bedroom.
It was a cold February night, and Jeanette Young, a social worker, had just finished her shift at the hospital.
You see them running up to the apartment complex with the battering ram in their hand, a crowbar. It was so traumatic to hear the way
the thing was hitting the door, and it happened so fast, I didn't have time to put on clothes.
And suddenly, she found herself frozen in fear. Completely naked. In a room full of men. 9 body cameras rolling. And you're just standing there.
And I'm just standing there. I mean, terrified, humiliated, not even understanding why in that moment that this is happening to me.
And the first thing police reach for is not clothing. It's handcuffs.
There were big guns and guns with lights and scopes on them, and they were yelling at me, you know, put your hands up, put your hands up.
What are you thinking right now?
I just remember, you know, being so afraid. It's one of those moments where I just felt like that I could have died that night. If I had made one wrong move, I felt like they would have shot me. I truly believe that they would have shot me.
A police officer wraps a short coat around her shoulder, still leaving her front fully exposed. Even the sergeant in charge of the raid just stands there talking to her. She has nothing.
While that's coming in, just really look at what's happening with how many officers are in there and what the sergeant does.
There is no regard for decency when it comes down to folks of color, because clearly there's multiple times that this woman could have been afforded clothes, a towel, or something to cover herself.
Then she gets a blanket.
They just threw something over me. And my hands are behind my back and I'm handcuffed. So there was no way for me to secure the blanket that they put around me.
But the blanket just keeps sliding open. More humiliation.
You need to tell me what you're looking for. What are you looking for?
You can see how some officers just stand there, until this one, wearing a mask, sees what's happening and goes and holds it in place.
It felt like forever for me. It felt like forever. Oh my God, this cannot be right. How is this legal?
Listen how she repeatedly tells the raid team they were in the wrong place. We counted. She says it at least 43 times.
You got the wrong house.
And she was right. They were in the wrong house. Our investigation uncovered police failed to do the most basic research before getting the search warrant approved. We found they simply took the word of an informant who gave them Anjanette Young's address. The informant claimed a 23-year-old man who was a known felon had a gun and ammo inside.
You don't have to shout.
Then, during the raid, something happens. Watch as 2 of the officers go to their squad car and begin reviewing their notes about the warrant. CPD would not comment on what you're about to hear the officers saying a few minutes later.
It wasn't initially approved for some crap. What's that mean? I have no idea, because I mean, they told him it was approved, and then I guess that person messed up on their end.
Messed up is an understatement. So, where was the target? Our investigation revealed he was awaiting trial on home confinement here at a different apartment in Anjanette Young's complex. How easy would it have been to locate him? Easy. Real easy. Because he was wearing a police tracking device, an electronic monitoring bracelet. It's possible he could have even heard the raid happening, because records show he was confined to the unit right next door.
But I'm telling you it's wrong. I'm asking you to let me call somebody. I'm asking you to let me put the clothes on. I will sit here and let you do whatever you need to do. Let me call somebody, let me call an attorney, because I'm telling you this is wrong. I have nothing to do with whoever this person is you're looking for.
We found if they would have done a little bit more research, they might have found where the target actually lived.
Yes.
I think Screw Up is being too kind, because ultimately this is a constitutional rights issue.
Keenan Salter is Anjanette Young's attorney and is suing the police department.
If this had been a young woman in Lincoln Park by herself in her home, naked, a young white woman, let's just be frank, if the reaction would have been the same? I don't think it would have been. I think they would have saw that woman, rightfully so, as someone who was vulnerable, someone who deserved protection, someone who deserved to have their dignity maintained. They viewed Ms. Young as less than human.
Relax.
They did eventually walk her to a room to remove the handcuffs so she could get dressed, but then put them right back on and kept questioning her.
There's no gun in this place. I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for 20 years. I follow the law. I don't get in trouble for anything. I don't do illegal stuff. I'm not that person. You got the wrong information.
At this point, the sergeant in charge of the raid tells the officer who got the warrant to step outside.
Let's go talk outside.
But you won't hear it because once outside, the body camera is shut off. Back inside Anjanette's home, another officer finally uncuffs her. She had been bound for 20 minutes. Listen as the sergeant returns with a new message.
We believe your story.
And you can see him trying to fix the door they busted so she could close it and lock it. But it was too damaged to repair, so watch as they try to find something to wedge it shut. They settle on an ironing board. Surreal? Surreal.
It's almost like a bad movie. When I watch this, I feel like I'm watching a movie. But those are no actors. I'm no actor. This is my real life. And it happened to me. They're adding trauma to people's lives that will be with them for the rest of their lives. The work is warranted. They need to do the work, but they need to do it right. They can't just callously do it and leave people's lives in ruins because they got it wrong.
The sergeant in charge apologized to her before he left. CPD has refused to comment on this case. It's been 2 years since the raid, and COPA, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, says they're still in the process of trying to interview all of the officers involved. They did not say if anyone has been disciplined. At City Hall, Dave Savini, CBS 2 investigators.
So we know a couple of things, right? I'll jump right in. A couple of things. One is that, you know, they're talking about they still don't know whether officers have been disciplined and they have to still interview people, right? So this is one of those, the only people you're interviewing is police and the civilian. And I don't know which officer is going to say that this was a mistake, but I would gather that all of them are going to stick by their story in reference to the information they had was valid and that this is what we call a good faith mistake. So therefore we should be immune. This is what we call immunity. We should not be subject to a lawsuit. And so there is this theory in federal court and in New York called qualified immunity. That means officers have a certain grace period or a certain area where they could fall prey and make a mistake, but also not be sued based upon that mistake. So it's qualified immunity. Mark it down because you'll hear that a lot when police officers are actually bad actors. They try to shield themselves from liability by using that term. And so, I mean, we can break this down bit by bit. And in doing so, I would start with that clearly she has a cause of action to bring a civil rights violation, and they have the wrong department. There's definitely abuse of authority. And I think, you know, when people watch our show or they hear folks of brown and black skin marching, yelling Black Lives Matter, looking for police reform, I often get the sense that people take it, those that are in law enforcement, take it in such a way that, all right, well, you police yourselves. If you don't want nothing to do with us, you know, I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to skip out the park. And I think her words speak volumes when she says, the work needs to be done, but it needs to be done right. She says the work needs to be done, but it needs to be done right. And
it's so crazy how some individuals in law enforcement try to make it an either or. If you want security, you got to be willing to submit yourself to humiliation and disrespect. and it's not an either or. You can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
And that's
we can enforce the
absolutely.
law properly and respect the citizens that we swore to protect.
And so when you look at her being handcuffed, now she's a social worker, right? But when you look at her being handcuffed, so let's go to point one. You're executing a search warrant. When you walk into a location, you want to make sure that safety's first from the police officer's perspective. So you may handcuff the person. After you realize that the place is secure, no one's jumping out of a closet. Now remember, you're not looking for a person, you're looking for items. And that's why we started this show distinguishing between a search warrant and an arrest warrant. If you're looking for somebody, then I understand somebody jumping out of the room, somebody that's wanted for a violent crime, you may handcuff everyone in the place and leave it as such. But when you're looking for an item or you're looking for items, then you shouldn't have that issue. So after you secure the place and after you realize no one is there, there's no reason for this woman to still be in handcuffs. There's no reason why she couldn't have been afforded the opportunity to have a robe or a blanket put over her and have an officer stand there right next to her and hold that blanket. But the disregard for folks in our community leads them to just like, you know what, you just stand there while we do what we do because we're right, you're wrong.
It's crazy.
And we're going to prove it to you because after we do the initial search, we're going to keep on searching. We're just going to keep on searching and just keep on searching hour after hour. And this is what I spoke to before, right? Search warrant says, got to come in before 6, can't go in there after 9. Speaks nothing to what happens in between. So they could search 4 or 5 times just sitting in there.
But there was a female officer there. And the female officer didn't have common sense enough to try to at least the human dignity of having her cover herself when there was no threat shown. This is ridiculous.
That person didn't look like her. And you look at and we always talk about, I always talk about in cardiac arrest and everything that we do. And this, Dr. Grant, this. If you just look at race, then you're missing it, right? You can go deeper. And the victim and the reporter, investigator, and the lawyer really spoke volumes to this. Race, class, race. I'm sure when the lawyer said Lincoln Park, he's talking about a different socioeconomic class, and then he's talking about a different ethnic demographic, right? And so that's what we're speaking about. We talk about classism and racism go hand in hand. And so that gives them the freedom to do what they want, or at least the perceived freedom to do what they want, because now they're being sued, and rightfully so. Because being handcuffed for, I think it was 2 hours or 20 minutes.
20 minutes she was handcuffed.
20 minutes handcuffed in the nude. When I do these type of cases and we go through the depositions, right? Here's a big secret. New York City and many other municipalities, they have a formula that they use, right? They'll never tell you that this is the formula they use. They use the amount of time detained, whether there was any physical injury, whether you were brought to a precinct, whether or not you had a case and the case was dismissed. They look at those categories. So if you're not physically hurt, if you're not taken to the precinct, if there is no case, and you're just standing there in handcuffs in 20 minutes while search is being executed, then to them, that has minimal value. Can you imagine that?
I'm not surprised. I mean, like you said, it's a matter of respect. When I saw her standing there, the images that come into my mind are our ancestors standing on a block waiting to be sold, our women standing there naked being examined. I think about Venus Hottentot and how my understanding is she was, taken from Africa to Europe while Europeans gazed upon her in wonder. That's what I think of. And, there's this idea that it's no big deal for this black woman to be standing there with no clothes on. She is not worthy of any level of respect. You know, you have them using the justification for the no knock and this forced entrance is that there is a particular individual who may be armed. And like you said, after they go in there and they don't see this individual, then that's it. That part of the issue in terms of danger is no longer present. She's naked, so it's not like you can say, oh, she may have had a gun under her sleeve or under her jacket or in her waist. There's none of that here. You know, so why are you handcuffing? Why do you have her standing there naked? What the hell is this?
And add insult to injury, you're going to allow her to put her clothes on. And I use the word, you're going to allow her to put her clothes on, because that's what happened. They allowed her to put her clothes on. And then you're going to cuff her again.
And then you're going to cuff her again. Because she's so damn dangerous.
And we're going to have a conversation about and then we're going to have a conversation that I believe you. You believe me? So why am I still handcuffed? Why am
Exactly.
I don't think I heard any Miranda.
Right.
You're questioning her as to whether or not she's committed a crime, i.e., in possession of a weapon.
And then what they're gonna proffer is that we didn't have to Mirandaize her, give her her rights, the right to remain silent, a right to have an attorney, the right to not make statements that can incriminate you. All those things that we hear on SUV and Law and Order, all those little things, you know, the Miranda warrants were not given. And their excuse is going to be is that she was not arrested. Well, goddamn, Howard Shabam.
It looks like a feature to me.
My blood is still boiling. This is the second time watching it as a black woman. There's so many levels on which this is just disrespectful. But then the nerve of them to tell her,
I can't leave. My freedom is taken away from me. And because I'm not in the precinct, I'm in my home. That means I'm not in custody, and that means I'm not under arrest. And that means you don't have to give me my Miranda warnings, and you can just ask me anything. Look, that's when you ask me. You ask me when I'm at my most vulnerable and distressed, so you can receive information and then use it against me. And in this case, none of that exists. And I just want to make sure, because I want to jump off that bandwagon. None of that exists. She's in a home by herself. You got it wrong, and you know you got it wrong because you went outside and you had a conversation. I don't know the timeline as to that, but you went outside, you had a conversation. You're going to come back and she's still handcuffed?
still handcuffed, and they had the nerve to tell her to stop screaming.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Like, I just, my pressure, I really had to prepare for today's show knowing that we were going to watch this again.
And if I'm correct, they attempted, I believe, the district attorney's office or the city tried to prevent her, tried to get an injunction to prevent her
from showing the video,
from showing this video,
yeah,
because of the way it makes them look. It's just amazing, the gall.
That's the number one move that's always used when there's video out there. And the number two thing is that, look, I know the wheels of justice move slowly because I've been on both sides of it, counsel and prosecutor. But there's some time that the wheels can move quick, and they need to be moved very quick. Here, there should be suspensions handed down from top to bottom with the quickness.
Absolutely.
And listen, I'm pro labor, I'm pro Weingarten rights. But, you know, come on, man, because I would imagine right now the excuse that they're using or what they're asserting is some, because I'm not completely familiar on you know, the intersection between the rights of these officers and whether or not you can interview them on this and their rights under collective bargaining agreement between the union and the police department. But 2-year delay in interviewing these officers and giving them an opportunity to state what it is that they know or don't know, or to state their piece as to what happened.
And we just see on the body cam.
And then you just body cam. Yeah, the body cam is empirical evidence right there. That's
you didn't find anything that was illegal. You didn't find any illegal contraband. So what? And
there was an admission of some level of a lack of either due diligence or some sort of failure in terms of duty, in either, you know, the approval that was given, whether this warrant was signed off on or not, because that was admitted to on the body cam. I'm not sure who they were referring to as to who messed up and who didn't. You have, like you said, you have the body cam, which is empirical evidence right there. You also have the reporter who mentions an electronic monitoring device having been placed on the target of the search, which is empirical in of itself and evidence of a failure of due diligence to do your job in terms of making sure that the information is accurate. Because if this individual is on an electronic monitoring device, I mean, come on. Now you may get into some issues. They may argue and come back and say, because I used to deal with electronic monitoring devices directly, whether or not it only is going to cover a certain radius and
I can give two shits
and that sort of stuff. But
that's a red herring. That got to do with that dude in his apartment across the street. We talking about Fourth Amendment violations here. We're talking about even Eighth Amendment violations. I mean, like, let's open up the box, cruel and inhuman treatment, right? Usually we look at that in reference to you being inside an institution or being in prison. But if you're in custody and you leave me unclothed, standing there for 20 minutes or so, then have me handcuffed in clothing, sitting there.
What I'm actually referencing, what I'm referring to is the fact that they go into this apartment and he's not there, but there's evidence that's in the hands of law enforcement that tells them exactly where this individual is.
Because he has a tracker.
I mean, he has an electronic monitor.
Okay,
that
all right.
Electronic monitor tells you where he is. And
I need to breathe. I need to breathe. We're at the top of the hour, and this show could go on for 2 hours today, breaking down all the different points about what was wrong with this. 2 years for this woman to get justice, and still in the process because they're still delaying. That's why Speaking Legally is here. That's where the legal meets the cultural, why we have to have these conversations, why we really have to be just conscious of what's happening and what's causing all of the outcry on the injustice and the disparities that exist within our law enforcement. So I thank you, because we could stay here. I need to go drink some water because literally my pressure is up. Just seeing this again, it's so heart-wrenching that this is not the only time that this has happened. Unfortunately, there are multiple cases that don't make it to the media, that body cams weren't on, but we're grateful that we can break down the law.
Special places get special media. We all know that, right?
And
if I'm her, I mean, it happened the way it happened, but I'll be damned you're going to take some iron board and some box and close my door. Matter of fact, somebody's staying here tonight. One of y'all just sit outside this house right here. Y'all sit right out here. Since y'all broke my door, anybody can come in, have a seat right outside here. You know what I mean? Here's
Absolutely.
Give me the hotel bill. Let's get this going.
Indeed. To be continued, because there's some more to this that'll probably come in a follow-up, but we are at the top of the hour for our show. I'm going to let our attorneys give their last comments as we thank you again for being a part of our first season of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. And next week, Wednesday, right before the year ends, God Spare Our Lives will be here to close out the first season. So we want to thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this broadcast with others. And I'm going to let Attorney Royce Russell and Attorney Edward Pichardo give their last remarks as we close out today's show. And we wish you a safe and a happy holiday season for those of you that are celebrating Christmas, Kwanzaa, and we'll be in time to wish you a happy new year next week.
I know I got to hurry up and get out of here because I know my Dominican James Harden over there, Ed Pichardo, got a game today with Houston. That beard is looking long, little Dominican James Harden. We got to get out of here. We jumped you off the COVID list so you could play tonight, brother. You know what I mean? So you could play tonight. You know what I mean? So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you after the Feliz Navidad, after the Merry Christmas, and days into Kwanzaa. Take care and be well.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave the audience with this. The same way we fight for the dead, we have to fight for the living too. This sister, God bless her that she was able to survive this encounter. And she is worthy of the same fight that we give for all these other brothers and sisters who have passed away during similar incidents. So I wish you all, Godspeed throughout these holidays. Stay safe. Happy holidays to you and all of your family. Feliz Navidad, Prospero Año Nuevo. Feliz Pascuas.
Adios, everyone.